Welcome back to week two of our generative AI sprint. You already know I'm Rodrigo Fuentes. Today, we're diving into two of the foundational go-to-market activities. So, understanding your customer and crafting the right message are going to be what we focus on today. I think that both of these are really make or break for many companies. And unfortunately, too many companies don't really give this the time and attention that it deserves. But with generative AI, we now have the tools to explore those customer needs, like Ben talked about, where Ben is interviewing the customer and learning a unique insight, passing that through LLMs to try to distill and extract the insights that are going to be very relevant and then make them digestible for ourselves, but also for our team, which is often a challenge, right? It's hard to get the whole team rowing at the same time in the same direction. And that's going to be one of the superpowers of creating distilled and digestible packages for other members of the team to consume. Now, the goal is that this is not new stuff. This is a concept and a tactic that has been around for as long as marketing has been around. What's new is the ability to go from taking months or a quarter of multi-team member coordination to accomplish that to doing it perhaps in hours, days, if not weeks. So, by the end of this session, I want you to come away with an ability to turn AI into your co-pilot for market research and clarity. All right, let's get into it. So the big idea driving today's session, in the past, market research was something you outsource or avoided because of time and cost, right? Messaging was something you guessed at, but now using Gen AI, we can build systems to test and learn continuously. Now, I know I mentioned that last week, learning. The teams that learn the fastest perform the best. So it's not about just replacing your instincts. You still need those, but it's about supporting them with evidence and getting to the nugget of your instincts faster. Now, the best go-to-market strategies are not necessarily the most creative. They're the ones that are most aligned with what customers really care about. Right? And that's what we want to focus on. We want to use generative AI to help us reach alignment faster. So, fast, repeatable, insight-driven workflows are the new norm. And that's what we really want to drill in. Now, raise your hand if you've ever written copy or created a deck that just didn't quite land. Give it a, I see some nodding hands, some hands. Okay, yep. I think all of us have, right? Because we're using our intuition, we're guessing, we think we know what the customer wants, but maybe we haven't done enough of the research. Or we think we know our competitive edge, but it's based on outdated assumptions. The marketplace is constantly evolving. So now I want us to imagine how generative AI can help us change this paradigm, right? We want to research and iterate in the span of 30-minute chunks, not weeks. We want to bring that feedback loop into the research and into the messaging so that we're not just using our intuition, but then we're also marrying it to whatever the customers are saying. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to start with how to use AI to understand the landscape, what customers care about, what trends are emerging, and what the competition is saying. Then we're going to look at segmentation, how to turn this vague audience into really sharp customer profiles. And then from there, we're going to examine competitive positioning. And then at the end, we're going to use AI to draft messaging frameworks that actually resonate with your user personas. Now, after the break, we're going to get hands-on with breakout rooms, and we're going to try these techniques. In the email that Alejandro sent out before our session, he made sure that each of you had access to an LLM. I don't think that's a challenge. And that you have access to your materials handy, right? Customer interviews, any decks that you have, your website copy. You're going to want to have those all quickly available, ready for copy paste, because as you know, the breakouts are going to be fast and useful, hopefully, if you're able to get something out in front of one of our facilitators to really tweak it in and dial it in. Okay, so market research. I want you to imagine having a full-time researcher on your team. People typically hire for this role, at least in the past, and it'd be maybe a $70,000 FTE who would do all the work of reading all of the industry reports and all of this stuff. And instead, what I want us to reimagine is how do we use AI to summarize what real users are saying? What frustrates them? What do they love? What language are they using? Man, these insights are what help you build better products, write better copy. And you don't need a PhD in market research. What I want us to imagine is we need the right prompts. We need to figure out how to ask the system for what we want. So here's our first example. In the bottom of the slide, you see an example prompt, and it says, summarize the top 5 customer pain points from, insert your competitor here, based on Reddit reviews. Now, in some cases, depending on which model you use, it may have the ability to go out to the internet, read information, and then incorporate that into its context window that provides a response. That's great. If you have an extra minute or two, you could also just go to the source that you want, Reddit, G2 reviews, wherever this information is located, Yelp, for example, and you can copy paste the information into the context window yourself. So in this example here, what you see is I pasted in Reddit reviews of people talking about Salesforce. And in this example, you have people, these are summaries of the real pain points that people have with respect to Salesforce, right? And it goes on and on. It gave me 5 top customer pain points. I'm going to click on it, and it actually will take me to the ChatGPT thread where I had this. And you can see the format. I just said, summarize the top 5 pain points from Reddit. And I said, here are the reviews from Reddit. And I did 3 backticks, pasted it in. You can see it's really long. I mean, like I didn't format it at all, just copy pasted it in. And I said, go. And then it started writing it all out. Now, this is a good example of understanding what your customers are really caring about and how can you position your product relative to that. So how do you do this, right? You probably already have access to some of these. ChatGPT, Claude can summarize the articles, the threads, the reviews. You could even set this up on an automated trigger, right? You could set up Google News plus the workflow automation software I referenced last week called Zapier. And these two together will surface new content in the specific niche or area that you're interested in, and then AI distills it for you, right? Alternatively, Perplexity is a great source for internet-aware queries that's pairing the internet search along with some kind of LLM distillation. And then if you want voice of customer data, G2, Reddit, I think are gold mines for this. And the key is to combine these tools in a way that matches your workflow. But more importantly, if you are, the lioness hunting in the savannah, you have to know where the watering holes are for your customer base. You have to know where they're really speaking their truth that aligns with your problem set and your product that you are offering to them. So think about that and know where they are. Okay, let's shift from broad market insights to something more specific, customer segmentation. So AI can help you group your leads, your users, your prospects into meaningful clusters. So as an example, you might see that mid-market finance leaders and early stage product managers buy your tool for very different reasons. And once you identify those differences, you can speak to each group more effectively and essentially sell more. So in this example, in the prompt in the bottom of the slide, we see group these 20 buyers into 3 customer personas with key differences in needs and values. Let's take a look at that. So what I did here in this example is I went to ChatGPT. I had Apollo on the right side. This is an export from Apollo. And Apollo, as some of you may already know, for those who don't, it is a combination of customer prospecting tool combined with email sequencing and a host of other features. In this case, I'm referencing the ability to go to Apollo, identify my customer persona according to filter criteria that they offer. And so here I was perhaps targeting different managers of companies that do sales enablement operations. And so I downloaded this list. In this particular example, I grabbed 30 rows of data and then I copy pasted them into ChatGPT and I asked it to create this clustering. I'm going to click into this so we could see the actual prompt. Okay. You can see here, group these 30. And again, I didn't format this much more than the structure provided already by Excel. Pasted it in. And I specifically requested that it does not use Python because it sometimes wants to go on and do very fancy clustering algorithms. I really, in this case, just want to rely on the LLM to pick up on interesting clusters based on job functions, company sizes, the industry focus, revenue, whatever data set is given to me by Apollo. And what I see here are three personas that have been pulled out from the data. And I find this particularly relevant and interesting because this then allows me to segment down a list of 1,000 prospects down to more manageable 300 prospect-ish personas that then can receive their own messaging, right? It'll be different if I'm talking to a tech-forward revenue leader at a mid to large B2B company versus someone in marketing ops at a fast growth or maybe a startup, right? And so positioning my product and segmenting those users is an important part of my go-to-market. All right, let's get back to our deck over here. Now, the best place to start this is with real data that you already have, right? Past customers, notes from discovery calls, or your CRM data. So Ben, again, really love that you were already using your existing interviews and passing those into ChatGPT. Um, One interesting call out that you had already is that, oh, geez, I already summarized them for myself for human consumption. They're so, you called it truncated, right? They're already distilled. And so there's a lot of rich data that might be missing had you just recorded the transcript or kept the text file of that transcript. And so that's why earlier last week I recommended Granola. There are many others. Monica mentioned Fathom. Zoom has a built-in transcriber. You could use all these to maintain and preserve that rich information that then gets fed into a prompt like the one that I showed you earlier. And the goal of all this is to ask AI to turn that scattered information into clear and clean customer profiles. You can ask it, what are the most common triggers for a deal, right? If you have your closing calls or your down the mid funnel calls with customers, then you could start understanding what objections are popping up the most. What matters most to this particular persona? And the takeaway here is that when your ICP is clear, everything downstream from it, messaging, pricing, outreach, all of that gets easier. Now, in the prompt example at the bottom here, we have this concept of visit a website and identify what the company sells. Then based on that, create a detailed ideal customer profile. So let's take a look at that. So I'm gonna come back to that. First, let me hit the competitive analysis section. In this part, we're gonna look at the public-facing content of a competitor, and we want to make sure that they're a competitor that you are positioning against, that they have their act together. And with AI, you're going to compare that your company sells to what they're offering in terms of their positioning, their pricing, their feature sets, all of it using whatever public information is out there, right? Can you understand what is their pitch? Who are they hiring? What channels are they active on? So this is what we want to do. And in this example here, you can see that we're going to say compare your product to competitor product in terms of pricing, positioning, and features. Now, quick call out here. In order for this to work out of the box as described here, the LLM should have access to the internet. And there are many that do. Just be aware that that's what you're asking it to do. So in this prompt example, I imagined that my product was HubSpot CRM, and I imagined that the competitive product was Salesforce CRM to, carry along the earlier example. And of course, both of these products have been talked about enough all over the internet for many, many years. So there's already very rich training data inside of the model to do that comparison. But it is still possible to do this comparison even for your new product or a relatively new competitor by having, like I mentioned, an LLM that can access the internet. If for some reason that is not the case, then you could rely on the earlier method that I mentioned, where you simply provide that information yourself. You ask ChatGPT, perhaps deep research, to perform research on such and such competitor, extract that, put it into a file, and then attach the file as context for this particular prompt. So you can see it's a multi-step process, but what you'll get out of it is a very clear comparison of two different products. And I'm going to click on this one. Oh, it looks like I don't have the link here, but I could send this to you later. You'll see that there is, feature by feature, product by product comparison with respect to these three elements. And of course, I would have done more had I asked it to go deeper on this. Okay. Now, the idea here is that these tools make competitive research not just doable, but really fast, right? You can copy paste homepage content into GPT, ask it to extract themes. You could layer on prompts to analyze three competitors side by side, ask Chat to create tables of that. You could social media scrape or go to the job board summaries and you can track those changes in real time. The takeaway here is that what used to take a strategy team days, right, can now take hours with some not too clever automation. In this slide, you can see a couple of different tools. Come back and watch this portion of the video. If not, take a screenshot of it. And if you have any questions on any of these, happy to go into the details. But it's pretty amazing what you could do with a lot of commercial off-the-shelf software that's out there that's either free or pretty close to free. Okay, so this is, I think, where really the magic happens. Once you know the audience, AI can help you write the copy that's tailored to each segment. You can create multiple versions quickly, test them in real campaigns, and then double down on what works. You'll recognize that workflow from our last week's session where we talked about Klarna creating 30 campaigns. We're not going to create 30 campaigns, but we're going to create a few quickly. We're going to test them. The whole point here is that I don't want you to get stuck rewriting the same sentence 20 times. Right? Let AI do the heavy lifting here. I know I have been there before where I just keep wordsmithing until it feels just right. And it doesn't mean that my audience understood it because I'm so in the weeds, right? I can't see the forest from the trees. And I think that's what this is helping us do as a tool. So in this example, we have this prompt, write three different value propositions for a risk-averse CFO at a mid-sized company. And I took Equality from Michael, one of our participants, just to like ground this. And the idea here is that we have three different distinct value propositions tailored to the ICP for Equality, right? I imagined account managers, controllers, the CFO, and you can see here it's breaking out the value prop for each one in a short, concise statement. Now, a word of caution and an important note here. A lot of people will poo-poo large language models because they produce quote unquote mediocre content. It's not great content. That may be the case. It is more often the case when the inputs are not great, when the prompt is not great, and most importantly, when the human in the loop quality control is not great or not paying attention. Which is to say that if you just take this output, copy paste it, and done, yeah, it's going to be mediocre, right? It's going to be as well done as the sort of average of the internet, given that this is how the systems work. Your job is to use this content essentially as a very fast junior level teammate that is inspiring you to create more sharper versions of what it is expressing. So the difference between me doing this and Michael from Equality doing it ought to be discernible because Michael has been living this problem and talking to these customers and should be able to very quickly gut check whether or not this is accurate. What would he change? What words might be different that resonate with customers that he's spoken to? Versus my ability to just look at it and say, yeah, looks pretty good. Makes sense based on what they sell on the website that I saw. So that's the word of caution. Read it carefully, read the content critically, and provide your voice and your experience to bear, because that's what's going to really separate you from anybody else who's competitive to you, who's doing the same techniques. Okay, so this is the simple framework that I think is golden. First, I want you to define the pain that your customer feels. Then imagine the ideal outcome, right? The dream. And then finally, show how your product is the bridge between those two, right? It's filling that gap. And then ask AI to give you 5, 10 versions of this and have it tailored to different personas that you have worked on up to this point. And this is what I think helps you find the phrasing that sticks. You will read 15, 20 different phrases for a couple of different personas, and some of those it'll just click. They'll resonate with you. And that's the ones that you really want to focus on. So I want to show you what this looks like in action. I took a short product description and a basic buyer profile. I fed it to ChatGPT. I got back two clear value personas, rather, three sharp value propositions, and I think a pretty strong elevator pitch. And all of that took perhaps a few minutes. And that's the power of structured prompting and workflow-driven approach. It's going to turn vague ideas into assets that you could start using. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to click into this, and here I have a workflow that I built out. This is a tool I already mentioned last week. It's called Diffie. And the start is just defining a basic description. That's what's going to be the prompt to kick off this process. And then in here, you're going to see that I have identified you are a sales researcher. Here is the company website. That's what I'm going to put in the basic description. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit so this is maybe easier to read. Okay. And then I asked it, based on that, create 3 most likely buyer personas that this company targets, and then output these particular things. Okay, that's going to then feed to the next one. And I'm going to say, great, now you're a product marketing guru. Here is the ICP that I have defined, and I am passing the result of the first language model into the second. I'm giving it the company website description again, and then I'm going to ask it to create a secondary distinct ICP that I should focus on. So essentially, I'm creating 2 parallel ICPs, feeding that into the next model. And again, I'm telling it you're the product marketer. Here are the 2 ICPs, forward feeding the previous results. And I want you to prepare 3 value proposition statements. All right, feed that into the 4th one. And again, here are my ICPs. Here's the value prop. Here is what you produce from the output of LLM3, the value proposition. Here's my website. Now give me 5 elevator pitch variations tailored to the ICPs that I included above. And then the end is just to gather it all up and show it to me. So I'm going to run it. I have already run this a couple of days ago in preparation. But if you're curious, send me your website description or a product description of your website, and we'll give it a run right now. This tracing model here allows you to see what was input. And I did Michael Nieto's equality just as an example. So I went to his website, copy pasted it in, and put that in the basic description. I'll let you look at that here. It's just a string or text representation of their website. Okay. And then that fed into the first model, and the output is, here's the first buyer persona, right? The CFO from a large enterprise, this revenue size, so on and so forth. That fed into the second one. It gave us the secondary ICP, the VP of Finance. That then proceeded to the third LLM. And the output there was creating the ideal customer personas. Okay. And then the 4th and final output was the 5 elevator pitches tailored to the ICPs and the value propositions that we had. Okay. So I would copy this, and now we could run with it. So let's go see that. I just pasted it here so it's easier for all of us to read, and here's just one elevator pitch for the CFO controller using that process I just showed you. And so, I'll give you a moment to read this. And then Michael, I'd be curious to hear how well does this align with, an elevator pitch of what it is you do?
I think it does a great job at, at least putting together, just took copy paste from the website, what actually, how I'm presenting it currently at this point. So I think it did a good job.
Excellent. And of course, there's always room for improvement. The workflow that I created here was very like toy example, very minimal prompt engineering. I did it in about, no joke, 5 minutes of just copy pasting, putting these together, propagating it forward, and here we are, right? So there's a lot of room for improvement here is I think what I want to focus on. I'm just going to go to the chat. If you're curious, send me your website description in the chat. I'll run it again right now, and we can take a look at it together in the Q&A section. So when I hit run, it's just going to ask me to copy paste the website description. It'll go through all the steps in about 2 minutes, and we can look at the outputs together. So throw your notes there in the chat if you're curious about that.
And that's just the text, right? From the webs from like your homepage.
Yep, that's just the text. Just grab the text. All right. So key takeaways. If you remember one thing today, let it be this. Research and messaging aren't these one-time activities, right? They're loops. AI lets you run through the loops faster. And the tighter the loop, the better the output. So focus on the inputs, get really good customer data, get really deep on the pain points, on the feedback that they're giving you, and then let AI help you iterate that towards clarity. That is really what's going to set you apart from every other person who has access to LLMs, ChatGPT, and everything else that's going to be coming our way in the next couple of years. All right. So what is next? We're of course going to do Q&A, but as you know, at the top of the hour, 10:10 or so, it's going to be your turn. In the breakouts, you're going to choose one task after another. We're going to define the ICP. We're going to create messaging for that ICP. And if there's enough time, you're going to have an opportunity to do some competitive comparisons. Use real data if you can. That's why we sent you that email to prep you for this session. If you don't have it, do a hypothetical. I want you to get your hands dirty, get your hands on the keyboard, and really prepare a chat with the LLM, because that's why we're being facilitators for you to ask questions, for you to get stuck, for you to try something. And ultimately, that's what really, that's where the learning happens. So your goal is to leave this room with one small experiment that you could try for your go-to-market going into the next week that we can then diagnose and figure out. Okay. Now it's important. I really want to emphasize this is about progress. This is not about perfection. So if you're new to AI, that's okay. Don't worry about it. If you're experienced, then push yourself to try something new. Either way, small wins will keep compounding. So use what you've got and run one useful test when you are in the breakout rooms. Okay, let's go to the Q&A. Let me get my screen here set up. Okay, I've got some chats. Let's go to the chats first. Oh, yeah, I love it. Trace is already bringing it. Cool.
I'm getting an error that I can only put in 1,000 characters.
Yes, let me show
Yeah.
you that. So if you're in Diffie right now and you're getting that error, let me go over here. Boop. Okay, under start, description, edit pencil, you'll see that there's a max length. Set it to a large amount, essentially, of characters. And this is mainly to control costs. If you set this to 100,000 and you pop in that many, the model will crunch the data and, of course, charge you accordingly. So that's why they have this here. I set it to 10,000. Then Trace, I'm going to put your copy paste here that you see. Okay. And I haven't tried it. I haven't tried it with a copy paste that's this small. Let's see what happens. So that's going to start running. You can see it's going through each of the different steps. I'm going to go to the tracing. So it is running through. And I think some of you might also wonder, well, what does this cost, right? Now, this is using the API of ChatGPT in this example. And as a result, this isn't part of your $20 a month or, whatever subscription package you have. This is running based on the actual number of tokens that are being generated. But fear not, because in the output, you can actually see what this costs. And I'm always really surprised to see how inexpensive this is. We're talking a total price of less than a penny for one of those steps. Okay, that's pretty cheap. And so let's take a look at that final output. Let's see. Trace, I'm just going to copy paste this back into a slide or maybe even a doc so we can look at it. And I will send it to you. All right, this is the output. Take a look at it. And in the meantime, I will just start doing this here. How's that looking, Trace?
It looks good. It looks good. We're still struggling with a higher level, like going back to what you were saying about the quality of the prompts. We still don't know how to which software package to develop first.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a broader, so I was doing kind of the same thing on my computer with geothermal, which is maybe a little bit more, but this is great.
Okay, great. All right, so you can see that's kind of the flow. And I'll also emphasize that this isn't the only way to skin the cat. There are so many ways to do this. You don't need this workflow. I set up the workflow because I wanted to be able to just kind of trigger it and have it run through the 4 or 5 steps that I had described across the messaging frameworks that I showed us. But there are lots of ways of doing this. And so don't feel intimidated that like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this multi-step process. Just do it manually, and that's okay too. All right, let me go to the questions. Got one more chat. Can you use custom GPTs with Diffie? I've built custom GPTs that have access to much of our content and background information. Great question, Brian. I'm not familiar if you can have specific custom GPTs, but let's take a quick look. In the models section, you can click here and you could load a model. My understanding is that this is kind of the default set. If your API key potentially has more models, fine-tuned models, I think you can definitely bring in the fine-tuned models, but I'm not sure specifically about custom GPTs. But if the goal really is to use the custom GPT because you have certain knowledge base associated to it, then I encourage you to go back and watch the first episode of this sprint, where you will see that there is a way, for example, to add a knowledge base. So you can add a knowledge retrieval step, and in the knowledge base, you can essentially create your knowledge base, import all your files just like you are doing in your custom GPT, and it's effectively the same process there.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rod. That's really helpful.
Cool. All right, let's see what else we got in the chats. Leaf. Oh, everyone's coming in. I love it. Leaf, I'll try to do yours next here in a minute. Let's see. Next in the chat is Chandler. Can you go through the differences in custom GPTs, different models, etc.? Yes. Okay. So let's take a look at what is a custom GPT, since it's come up twice now. I want to maybe put a finer point on that. So a custom GPT is a GPT that you generate and essentially configure in your own team or business plan configuration of ChatGPT. This is what it looks like. You click on this and you go to customize, my GPTs, and then you can create your own GPT. I'm going to show you one that's already created so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to edit this one that I've already created. And in this one, I've given it a name. It's a podcast editor. I've described it, and I've given it descriptions. I'm going to expand this. You don't need to read all this. I'll summarize it for you. Essentially, I am asking and providing instructions to this custom GPT to take inputs and organize those inputs and highlight what I think are interesting moments. The input typically is a transcript of a conversation, a podcast, a video interview that I've done with someone. And, these interviews could be 30 to 60 minutes long. It's it's hard to really distill it down to what were the real interesting moments. And that's what I'm asking in these instructions. I want you to highlight what are the interesting moments and give it back to me in an output that is, what's the main point? What was the insight? Give me the timestamps. How engaging is it? And explain to me why it's engaging. And then do this across the entire interview script, and then help me prioritize those timestamp moments. I then pass those on to my video editor, who is a virtual assistant in Kenya, and they do a wonderful job of taking the outputs of this process and then looking at the raw video file and then quickly editing it down to the real interesting moments. I then use that to then create clips on YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, etc., for purposes of my content creation process. So that is a custom GPT. One of the things that you could do to it, as Brian mentioned, is you could add knowledge. You could upload files to it so that there is some additional context that the model has in creating those responses. So that's the main purpose of these custom GPTs. It's like having a very opinionated starting point for a chat that you want to have with it. Okay. So then the question is, okay, what's the difference between that and different models? Well, let's go to the different models. We'll create a new chat. And let me silence, who's got that mute? And we're gonna mute Trace. Thanks. Okay. All right. So the different models are the drop downs here. These are all different models that you could use. You could read the little explainers here. You could also ask ChatGPT to explain the different models and when they would be good for. Long story short, in my experience, I find that using 4.0 is pretty good in most cases, does the trick. Now, if I'm doing something extra that requires more depth, then what I would switch to is something like O3, which is advanced reasoning. And just by a quick show of hands on the little video screen here, how many of you are familiar with the different concepts of thinking or reasoning models versus not? Can I just get a quick show of hands on that? Okay. Asher
That
raised
would
hand.
that would actually be really helpful if it's helpful for other people, because I use them, but I don't truly understand the differences. And I've asked ChatGPT and I haven't been able to get a full explanation.
Okay, awesome. That's a great, 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 great call out. Thank you. Well, let's do this. I think the easiest place to start might be just to maybe try to do a live example of what the differences might be. And I'm going to try to create one here that's maybe specific to the examples that we were looking at. So let's take a look at, I'm going to go and grab the prompt from an existing prompt step that I had here. I'm going to use 4.0 for this. So I'm going to paste this in. And here is the company website information. I'm going to use the information from Leaf's doc file. So give me a sec while I download that. Okay, got that. Okay, so this is a Leaf's doc file. It's not necessarily a website, but it's what we have. Here's my company's information. All right, so then I've asked it to prepare the 3 most likely buyer personas and then create the ICP. Everyone's clear on the prompt. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to run it. I'm going to open another window. I'm going to switch to O3. I'm going to run it. Same exact prompt. I just copy pasted it. And one of the things you'll notice is 4.0 is fast. It's coming in already. It's streaming. It's giving us what it thinks is the answer. O3 is performing the reasoning step. It is analyzing the input prompt. It is thinking, which is essentially one of the more recent techniques where before answering, it creates an internal short-term memory document of what the steps are in order to answer this question. And then it uses those step-by-step self-guided instructions that you see here. And it then, you can see here, this is like its internal short-term memory. It outlined what it ought to do in order to accomplish this mission. And then with the context of this, it starts answering based on that. So that's the main difference between the reasoning models and straight hitting the LLM directly like this. Here it really is just using that kind of probability next token concept that we discussed that first week. And in this one, it is doing a pre-processing step where it is laying out its plan in terms of how it wants to answer. Now, in an example like this, I think that this is a fairly straightforward, rather simple request. And so the details and the differences in the answer, I don't think are going to be very high, but let's see. This is the output from 4.0. And you can see here we have, pretty vanilla, straightforward answer. I mean, this mostly gets the job done, I think, right? It's telling you about the buyer personas. It is then crafting the ICP. You can see that here. And don't worry, Leaf, I will send this to you. And then in O3, it has identified these high probability personas. Very similar, very, very similar. And then output this ICP. It's formatted differently, but that's actually not, I don't think that has anything to do with the different model. And so I think you might be left wondering, well, what the heck's the difference? Why would I use O3 versus 4.0? And really it comes down to the complexity of the task. If we were to redo this example with, let's say, a coding exercise or deeper research, then tasks that often require many, many steps that are broken down into sub-steps, the reasoning models will perform better in those scenarios. So that's where you want to think about when to use these more reasoning type models. Coding exercises is a very classic example. For most of the concepts that we're discussing in our sprint, I can't think of any particular example that we've covered so far or that I will cover that necessarily requires you to use the reasoning models. But if it comes up, I'll definitely call it out so that you can unpack that. Hopefully that answered the question. If not, come back and we can get into that detail. Let me go to the next question. Ben says, ChatGPT uses my previous discussions as its LLM. Do you ever worry about adding bias to the results because of this? Absolutely. I think we all saw ChatGPT just announce earlier this week that they have extended the memories feature to include all of the chats you've ever had with it as part of its internal knowledge base as it prepares responses to you. And that could be a blessing, could be a curse, right? You could be sort of bootstrapping down a specific kind of local minima in terms of its knowledge or information as it tries to give you an answer. And that might not be good. It just might reinforce an echo chamber of thought or direction you already have. So in order to combat that, I like to hit different LLMs if I am unsure or if it's a very critical conversation or interaction that I'm having. So I'll go to Claude, maybe I'll go to Gemini 2.5, and I'll hit it with the same question and see if I'm getting a very different result, which helps me disentangle how much of the ChatGPT response is tied to my memories. Now that would be the curse side. The blessing side is that I think extending memories to all of your chat history is one of the interesting competitive advantages that ChatGPT has already and will continue to extend over other foundational model providers, because that's what really makes it sticky. The fact that it knows what direction you're thinking in, it can anticipate what you're going to ask next, what you like, how you like responses, and that is very powerful for purposes of creating a better product, right? It's not just this raw LLM that doesn't know something about what you're trying to accomplish, and that could be very powerful. Okay, so let's Alejandro, before we get to the top of the hour, can you I wonder if it's possible to identify if there are any new participants for purposes of our Zoom poll. I don't think we need one if the participants are more or less the same, and in which case we can just reorganize folks based on that first Zoom poll that we did. So just take a look at that while I keep addressing some of these questions. Okay, Michael asked, you're using ChatGPT Plus instead of the business plan. Is there a reason for choosing this over that? Not a strong reason. I was just a really early Plus subscriber and haven't made the switch. And I have another business account for my business that is paid by the business, and so that one is a business plan. So what you're seeing here is just an artifact.
Right.
Don't
So
read
just
into it.
just on that, it's like 25 bucks a month for the business, 20 for the plus. Just go with the plus.
Yeah, well, it depends. Plus does have some downsides. Primarily, the business, I believe, has additional training data protections. Read the FAQ. The terms of service and data privacy questions are constantly changing. My understanding is the business plan explicitly does not use any of your interactions for purposes of training their data. And this was, a big issue among many business users. And so they made that part of the business plan. And that's one of the differentiations.
Awesome.
But I'm
Thank
not
you.
sure if you lose anything in terms of beta access or other things there.
And I think with the business, you also have to maintain two seats.
Yeah,
So if you're just using one seat, yeah.
right. Yeah. Okay. I think those are all the questions in the chat. Let me just turn it over to the group at large. For our group, what feel free to raise your hand if you want to just jump in and ask a question. We can get into it there. Anybody have a question? I'll give it maybe a couple of seconds or minutes to let all this sink in. I know it's a lot.
Hey, Rod. Question. I love all of this. I guess that's comment first. Do you have any experience with scraping Amazon reviews or Amazon products? Because those research tools are so expensive, it'd be really nice to have like a workaround for them.
Hmm. Haven't personally tried scraping those elements. What have you tried already or researched? We'll just take a look at a Chemex filter. I was buying one of these recently.
Yeah, it would just be nice to be able to see the customer feedback. I know, so I have a lot of experience with B2B clients, and then they're trying to push B2C using Amazon, and so it's just harder to navigate like comparing competitors because Amazon is like not as, I mean, I haven't logged into the business account, so maybe there's some analytics that I just am not familiar with yet that I can access, but just from, yeah, there we go. It'd be great to have it break it down
Hmm.
without using, there are a couple of tools that analyzes it, but they're kind of expensive.
Hmm. My guess, I haven't seen the space specifically. My guess is that they guard that data pretty tightly. And
Totally.
so, if they have an API, it would be interesting to see what is being returned from it.
Sure.
And if they don't, they're likely licensing the data out to those third parties you referenced who are expensive. They're
Yep.
probably expensive because Amazon is charging them a fair amount for access to
Totally.
that underlying data. There are alternatives, of course. Consult with your risk tolerance and compliance team, if you know what I mean. And
Mm-hmm.
and there are ways to get the information. The reality is that a company of this size who cares this much about the data, who is offering a similar capability of analyzing their own data using this feature set right here, um whatever solution you can come up with, scraping, extensions, etc., is likely to be shot down relatively quickly.
For
And
sure.
so anything that you can build in the space, because if you can dream it, you can build it. The question is, how brittle is it? And how
Mm-hmm.
long lasting of a solution is it? So if it's a one-time thing, maybe you can do it. If it's a cornerstone of your business, much harder, I think, to execute that well.
Okay.
But feel
That
free to
makes
follow
sense.
up with me in a one-on-one session, and we can
Sure.
dive into the details there a bit more. But
Okay.
that's at least my initial take on it.
Okay. But also not impossible. Like I can copy paste reviews. It's just manual.
Yes, yes.
Got it.
If you're gonna do that, outsource, get VAs. You could check the latest on Claude Desktop, which gives you a virtual environment, and you could ask the LLM to perform some steps. If you're gonna do something manual, and I'm not here recommending that you scrape anybody, but if you're gonna do it manually, then I would recommend using Input Recorder if you're on um, uh, yeah. This is an example of one of many different tools like this. It is this sort of cottage industry of essentially mouse movement and click action recorders that you can record yourself on screen doing it once, and then you hit play and ask it to repeat 20 times. And that usually will get you through pagination. It'll get you to copy paste into a spreadsheet, very basic stuff like that. Works okay if you're dealing with data in the order of hundreds of entries. Won't work so well if you're dealing with tens of thousands of records that you need to do, because it essentially takes over your machine in order to accomplish this, which,
I didn't know this existed. That's exciting.
yeah. So take a look at that.
Cool.
This falls into a whole category of software called RPA,
Okay.
robotic process automation, or if I'm getting that acronym wrong. Yeah, there's tons of these tools. There's open source ones, there's free ones, there's paid ones. So just take a look at that.
Cool. That's helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Anybody else with a question? If not, we will take a bio break for 10 minutes. And then we'll be back for our breakout sessions. We'll start bringing in our facilitators and organizing our breakout rooms. I'm going to hang around for a bit for any kind of last minute questions, and we'll see you at 10:10. Let me start with introducing our facilitators. And I'm just going to go to each of you. I'll go based on my video gallery here. I'll go Taya, then Rafael, then Jason. This will be an opportunity for you to introduce yourselves to everyone so that we don't use more of our time in the facilitation rooms. Keep it short, 2 minutes or less. Just tell us about you, your background, your company, and a quick example or anecdote around, your generative AI experience. Let me go to Teo.
Yeah, great to be back. Thanks for having me. I'm Taya. I'm the founder of Future Proof, and we help organizations figure out how to approach generative AI, how to break down their workflows in a way that works for their teams, and figure out where generative AI is good to insert into the workflows and where to really double click on the human element and human relationships for operations. So we do that through consulting, through training, through coaching, all of that. And I'm excited to jump back in and facilitate a lot of the ICP marketing conversations that we're having today.
Awesome. Thank you. Let me go to Rafael.
Hey everyone, my name is Rafa Maya. I'm the founder of Spiga Property Group, and I have over 20 years of experience creating products and services in multiple areas. I'm particularly focusing on AI and automation, and I help companies mainly convert what I call noise, call it whether it's PDFs, audio, video, images, Excelis, or anything could be, put it into an information architecture, structure, data, and ultimately enter them into their workflows, working with AI agents and capabilities so that it can streamline the whole process. So I look forward to helping you achieve these goals.
Awesome. Let's go to Jason.
Hey everybody, Jason Cormier here. My background is I ran a marketing agency for 18 years. I sold that in January of 2023, which was interesting timing given that where AI was at that point. And I started an AI education and training company called the AI Marketing Forum. And so my focus is really helping not just marketers, but that is the emphasis on how to exponentially increase the value of AI, not only for their company, but for their careers. So if you go to aimarketingforum.com, you'll see there's a free community you can join if you're interested in that. There's free courses in there. And it's just a great community of about 800 people from all different backgrounds. So I appreciate, Rod, you having me here today.
Preach. I'm a member of the AI marketing community that you're building, so love it. All right. I think the breakout rooms are ready. Getting the head nod. Let's go. It's going to be great. I'll be floating around. If anyone has any questions, just feel free to chat me. And I'm really excited for what we're all about to learn. Hello. Welcome back. Gosh, I don't know who enjoyed it more, you all or me jumping from room to room. I got to see all the different conversations happening. I was loving it. Such expertise and so much participation from all of you. It was such a pleasure to see. I know the first week was like, oh, what do we get ourselves into? But I hope today is an example of what we want the next few weeks to look like, where you're really hands-on keyboard, doing the work and learning while having a co-pilot who is an expert along for the ride and teaching you and giving you feedback, pushing you to try things that maybe you hadn't thought about. I thought that was super valuable. I'm going to go to each of our facilitators, and if they could nominate or identify the person who is going to talk about what they did, what they learned, and what they're going to carry that through into the next week. Let me go to Taya first.
Okay, Michael, you wanna take it away? You're our representative.
Sure. I think I'm not sure if everybody's doing basically the same thing, but we were trying to first identify our ICP, and then after going through that, get an elevator pitch for our ICP. When we went through this as a group, I think I put in, prompts that were a little smaller, just saying like, based on this product description, can you please identify what the company sells, 3 buyer personas, etc. And then some other people on our team put together the full, text of a website or something that was a lot more dense on that end, and trying to see what the responses were on that end were interesting, and how they differentiated, and then how some of the responses might have been a little bit too long for, let's say, give me an elevator pitch. And then we worked through it and said, try to condense this to, a little bit more. Great. Now get this down to 1 or 2 sentences, and how increasingly using the prompts, you can get to something a little bit more accurate on that end. And then for the next week, I think our group sort of talked about internally putting together an email, with like the 3 or 4 of us, and just saying, hey, over the next week, here's the thing that we're going to work on to kind of hold ourselves accountable. So I think, Rod, we're keeping with the same groups? Is that
Not necessarily, but you hold yourself accountable.
okay? Cool. But either way, on this end, just trying to work on something to, over the next week to be like, great. For me, going to be adding some information for competitor websites to try to figure out how their messaging works, how the ICP compares to ours, on that end, and also trying to figure out with the data I have on clients, how I can use ChatGPT to maybe aggregate a little bit more information about those customers, instead of being like, great, to get this information, I need to ask the person, are they a business owner or an accounting firm? Maybe I can put into ChatGPT, take these email addresses, look at the handle, tell me what information you have, and try to see if, it can help me gain some more insights that way.
Love it. Just a quick note on that last part. Take the handles, the email address, throw them into Apollo, do an enrichment step, and you'll just be able to extract the data, which gives you job title, industry, software they use, and a bunch of other details that you might use for that purpose. Let me go to Rafa.
Sure. Let's take Asher, if you like.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. Let me pull up my screen here real quick. So I used the prompts just to give a little bit of context. We're in a company pivot right now, trying to go after kind of utilities. Grovera makes moisture sensors, plant moisture sensors, and specifically we're pivoting into dead fuel moisture, so dry sticks on the ground. And our the idea for our ideal customer profile is big utilities who have been held liable for the wildfires that they start. And so I used the prompts to generate our ICPs, and was happy to see that those lined up nicely with kind of the market research that we've been doing internally. And then specifically had it refine my prompts a little bit to focus on early adopters and give early adopters elevator pitches, specifically in California, where there's a unique
niche in the market where they're required by law to provide justification for any of their power shutoffs that they do. And I was really happy with how those turned out, those elevator pitches. So we also talked extensively about kind of scraping and personalizing these elevator pitches, like providing a chat GPT your specifically the links to someone's LinkedIn profile or the company website to personalize that messaging further. So I thought it was really, really helpful.
And what's a test or something that you want to carry through into the next week that we can ask you about?
I think something that I'd like to carry through is really digging into doing a little bit more research and using ChatGPT on our end to think about the structure of these utilities, the companies themselves, and how decisions are made internally at those companies. Rafa made a really great point, and that's that the people that are experiencing the pain in the companies may not be the people who ultimately sign off on the projects. So thinking about the pain points there and how those manifest themselves, it's not an easy question to answer by any means, but I think it's well worth it.
Excellent. Let me go to Jason.
So Lauren nominated Ben. Ben started to talk. We ran out of time. So Ben, yeah, you're on the spot, man.
You know, I got cut off. I was going to say I don't want to do it. But so first we were asked, to load our website, like our company website, and then from that information pull the ICP and just give a list, no explanation, anything about those ICPs. And then asked it to write a value proposition from that input for those different ICPs. And that turned out pretty good. It came into this contamination issue because we were asking it to go to the website and pull information. And I could tell that ChatGPT had been pulling off of previous discussions that we had had. So then I asked it to actually specifically pull from previous discussions and compare those things. So there was that aspect, which was actually, I think it's pretty important because like we don't want to put in our personal bias into what ChatGPT is telling us. And so that was pretty interesting. But anyway, it gave us elevator pitches. And then another trick that Jason said is, ask it to scrape out, kind of try to pull hidden discussions, kind of information about pain points that some of these ICPs have kind of potentially offline and discuss those and outline those pain points, which actually was quite interesting. And it actually had pulled examples of some of the big pain points that we're targeting. And it was great validation for what we're doing. And then it was kind of coming up with a pain dream bridge messaging generator. So to identify pain points and for different ICPs, what you imagine them to be wanting to do with your product and coming up with pitches to bridge the pain point and the dreams. And then feed that into kind of an outgoing mail to like a cold email to these companies as a pitch. And so that was a great flow. I think for my example in particular, I wasn't super happy about the rewritten cold email, but that is not its fault. And so, I mean, that's just, you've got to kind of take that 20%, as Jason said, take the 20% of good and try to refine that and get that good, up to a much higher percentage.
Well, let me stop you there. I know there's a lot more that all of us can share, but we're just a few minutes over our 11 o'clock stop. But I want to take a minute and just really thank our facilitators. Really enjoyed having them. I loved going from room to room. Sadly, many of you won't get an opportunity to experience all of them unless they want to come back. Jason, Rafael, Matea, you're always welcome to come back and facilitate more sessions. Hope you all had a lot of fun. I learned so much. As you know, we're going to send a follow-up email that's going to include some of the takeaways, a link to the recording, and what to expect next week. And then very quickly, hold up your fingers in front of the camera and somewhere I could see, hold up 1 to 5 fingers. How many stars would you give this workshop? Boom. Love it. Seeing 5s, 10s, double hands. I love it. Thank you all so much. That feedback's really useful as we continue to iterate on this workshop and what it looks like. So really excited for next week. All right, I know we all got things to do, so I'm going to stop it there. And again, thank you facilitators. Thank you participants for being so engaged and workshopping along with us. Looking forward to next week.
Thanks,
Take
Rod.
care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
And